Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 of Live Younger Longer. I am passionate about helping people live a younger life longer. And again, we're going to go into a myriad of topics. And today I'm really excited because we're going to talk about what it is like when we're going through kind of that work and rest balance. So I've been an entrepreneur. I started my first small business in 2002. I was able to build that big enough so I could retire in 2008 from AT&T. I spent about a 10-year career there, and so I've been fully on my own for almost 20 years now. And I don't know about you guys, but whether it's in my professional life in corporate America or in my entrepreneur journey, I have found times where I've been very out of balance when it comes to my work and rest. Again, I used to have that philosophy, oh, you can sleep when you're dead, right? Like sleep's for sissies. You don't need to rest. You don't need to take a day off. And my first small business that I built was a lawn and landscape company. And at the height of it, here in Southeast Texas, I was doing about 80 accounts a week, and I was working with my crews as well as on the business. So I was working in my business as well as on my business, meaning that I got to a point where a lot of times I would get to this area where the sun would come up. I would spend a little bit of family time. I would get out there with my crews. I'd be working all day. Then I'd come home and I still had work to do. So I wasn't really home because I was doing estimates and invoices and dealing with scheduling, employees, payroll, all the stuff that had to go with it. So even though I was off, I wasn't off. You know what I mean? And so it got to this point where I was having to figure out that balance because yes, we're making really good money. I was being a very good financial provider. I was just not a present dad. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to be a present father as well as a good financial provider. And I got to a point in my life where I needed to build leverage in my life. I needed to get to a point where I could build some time and financial independence so I could actually be a part of my kid's life. I had this realization when my boys were 8, or my oldest was 8. When he was 8 years old, I was listening to a podcast, and it was actually a leadership conference out of a church in Oklahoma. And the guy used to run Disney or help run Disney. And we got to this point where he made a comment that he had 18 summers with his kids and he realized he almost missed all of them. And again, my oldest at that time was 8, and I figured, man, if I don't do something, I am going to miss my kid's life. I have to make some kind of pivot. And that's where I was really going, but I was also burning myself out. So we know stress is a major piece to our longevity, right? Stress is that silent killer that can sneak up on you and smash you like a hammer. So we have to find that out. And I am going to be using a lot of biblical references. I am a follower of Christ. I'm unashamed about that. I think the Bible is one of the best business books out there. It has so many principles that we can apply to our daily lives. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we kind of go into some of this because, it's interesting when you look at it, even if you look back in the Old Testament. I want you to really think about this. Like God worked those 6 days. Now, on that sixth day, right, he created Adam. So he made last at the end of everything. And so he made man on the sixth day. But what happened on the seventh? God rested. Ultimately, so did Adam. Adam rested that seventh day. So now think about this. This is before the fall. So rest is part of the perfect plan of God for your life. We should incorporate rest into our life. So this is before the fall of man. And so there was a couple things that happened before the fall of man that I thought were pretty ironic. And we're going to talk about these in later episodes. And again, I have a lot of fun guests lined up that we're going to be talking with. But what was interesting, a couple things before the fall. Number one, the first thing that happened was rest, right? He rested. But the other couple things that happened, number one, was a willingness to work. So God told Adam to tend the land, right? To look after the Garden of Eden, right? To work the land, to tend the land. So work wasn't a result from the fall, like it wasn't a punishment. It was something when everything was perfect, right? It was before the fall of man, before everything happened with Adam and Eve, right? Where she bit the apple in the fall, and he kind of put out a bunch of judgment out there after that. It happened before, right? The willingness to work. So I think hard work is one of God's greatest blessings. I think it's one of the best ways for therapy. I think hard work is one of God's greatest therapies, right? And I've seen this with one of my boys. So when my oldest boy graduated in 2020, he was going through a lot at that time. So you might be able to relate to this where you had a kid that was going through that. So he had a long-term relationship that ended right before everything with COVID happened. And then of course there was a shutdown, so there was a lot of isolation that happened. Then he started his first semester in college and it was all online. He was very frustrated at that time. He thought he was wanting to go into either like mechanical engineering, something along the engineering route. And so his first semester, which I'm not sure who advised him, it wasn't me on this part, but he took six classes, right? He took six classes, and three of them were physics, chemistry, and calculus. And two of the professors he had a very hard time understanding on Zoom, and his calculus teacher didn't really teach. He would just email out assignments, say, hey, even on a Sunday morning, have this problem, have this problem submitted by tonight. And he was super frustrated because he didn't feel like he was learning. Now, he was always very good at math. He has an engineering mind, like he creates things all the time. When he was a kid, I remember him playing the Call of Duty game, and I came home one day. He had an entire city built out of paper. Like he used to make little. I don't want to call it origami, but it was almost like that, like these claws, right? And he'd have these big claws, or he actually would create little paper guns that would shoot little paper deals. Like he was so mechanically engineered, inclined, right? So that's just how his brain works. But he was super frustrated, and I'm a big proponent of there's so much opportunity out in the world, right? And I've told all my boys, if you don't want to go to college, that's fine. Don't go to school just to get a degree. Now, if you're going for engineering, medical, law, something you need that specialized knowledge, absolutely, there's a place for college. But in today's world, there's so many opportunities out there where you don't really need to go into that, right? And I'm a living example of that. I'm a guy that graduated high school, had no clue what I wanted to do. I just got to the point where my dad taught me through hard work, anything is possible. And again, I got married at 20 years old. My wife was in school. She was going to school for interior design and design. She actually used to draw house plans by hand. That's where she went into school for. I went to work and I was just willing to work really hard. And I wanted to go after what I wanted through the area of hard work. But like I told my son, I was like, man, are you really sure you want to do this? Like, have you ever looked at an engineer's life? Are you sure you want to be kind of in an office? And he's very physical like I am. And I just didn't know if that was a good fit. And so he ended up getting a job in the industry of refractory, which refractory is high temperature bricklaying. And he works at refineries all over the world, multiple different kinds of refineries all over the world or all over the country. And he got into this work, and what I saw mentally, what happened is all of a sudden he was not only was the hard work great therapy for him, but it was that sense of completion. It was getting out there, starting something, creating they make some amazing structures and seeing the fruit of his labor. I found that in my lawn and landscape company a lot, where you'd show up, the property looked like garbage, right? It looked very unkept. You spend a couple hours there and it's cleaned up. It looks great, right? It was that ultimate gratification, right? That sense of accomplishment, like you see the fruit of your effort. So again, I think hard work is one of God's greatest therapies that he gives us. And you can find a lot of value through your work. That's where I think you ought to go after your passions. I think you should go after something that aligns with your values and that you find joy in your work. On the flip side of that, you need rest. So, God even talked about in Ezekiel, right? He talked about how, you have 6 days each week to work for your ordinary work. He says, this is Ezekiel 20, or I'm sorry, Exodus 23:12. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but on the seventh, you must stop working. This gives your ox, your donkey, a chance to rest. It also allows all the foreigners living among you to be refreshed. We should spend time to refresh. We're supposed to refresh. Now, I think rest finds a lot of area. I'm not only going to be talking today about a physical rest because I think that's important. You have to charge. Like I talked about in an earlier episode, Eric the trainer, he was a Hollywood trainer. Like this guy could transform your body in 6 weeks, right? But he used to tell me, because I wasn't a guy that slept much, and he would say, again, that the oven is to cookie dough what sleep is to the body. That's where all the change happens. That's where you get refreshed. That's where your body can actually restore itself, right? That's where it heals. So sleep, physical rest is very important. We all know that if we're busted up and can't perform like we're supposed to, we know that's going to affect you. So you got to get to this point, right, where you allow for that physical rest. You can recharge. How many of us sometimes, again, find that place to where we can just unplug, recharge? And for a lot of you people, I'm telling you, put down the phones, get off social media, like get off some of these things for a little while, like detox for yourself. I remember hearing Charlie Kirk talk about this a lot, where he would literally take a day where he put his phone in a drawer, and for 24 hours, he didn't touch it. He spent that time with his family. He spent that time refreshing. He observed basically the Sabbath day, where he just unplugged, and it refreshed him, where he actually got more work done because of that, because of taking that day of rest, than he would have if he would have just been burning the candles at both ends. But that's what we get in that habit of doing all the time. So having that point of rest. But I also think, and again, the spiritual rest that we have. I think so many people in today's world are so unhappy because they get to this point where spiritually they are just unsettled. They never rest. And I love this part out of Mark, where it talks about that, where Jesus basically had said, come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and I will teach you, because I am humble and gentle in heart, and I will find rest for your souls. I think so many people in today's world, they don't have that rest. And I'm a pretty unapologetic evangelist about this, because I spent 24 of my years not living with Christ. I spent first 24 of my years living in the world as wild as you could think. I mean, I was one of those people you would look at and be like, half the time you would probably not want a relationship with. I remember my wife talking back in the day. She's like, man, your mouth is harsh. And I'd be like, what the F you talking about? My mouth is harsh, right? Like, I didn't even realize how much I was cussing, and the tone of my voice, and how everything was just very, very in your face, very black and white, and all these things, and carrying around a lot of pride and a lot of unrest and a lot of judgment and a lot of, just judging everybody for no reason. Until I got to a point where I fully surrendered my life to Christ. I took his yoke upon me, right? And he gave me rest. He took so much anger and jealousy and again, unrest out of my life, to where I can be at peace. So a couple weeks ago, my mother had passed away. I was at peace with that, because I knew her relationship with Christ. I knew where she was. I knew she's living her best day. Yes, I miss her, and selfishly, I want her here. I still think about calling her when things come up. I'm like, I got to call mom and talk about that. But knowing where she is, knowing that salvation, it gives me rest through this situation, knowing where she was. And I think in today's world, there are so many people. Tulsi Gabbard actually talked about this in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, where she really talked about, there's so many people in this world that don't have a relationship with God because they want to be God. And they take on that yoke, and they're so judgmental. They're so just, they have all this anger and vitriol against anybody that has a different opinion of them, because they don't have rest. They don't understand what it means to be at peace and to have rest. I'm so thankful I'm not in control, right? I'm so thankful that I know God knows the next day from the beginning, right? That he knows what's going to happen each and next day. I'm so thankful that I can be at a point where I know that I can be at peace. Or even when I have a lot of turmoil in my life, I can lay down in bed when I'm going to rest, and I could be, kind of talking to God and saying, God, man, I'm going through X, Y, and Z. I don't know where to go. I don't know the direction to take. I don't, all these things that hit you. If you have a lot of time where you're going to bed at night and your head is just all over the place, being able to almost, like I jokingly say to God sometimes, tag, you're it. I'm giving all this to you. I'm going to sleep. It's your turn, right? Handle it. Right. Like having that peace of knowing that I'm not here alone. I believe that we are created by a creator. And I believe that through this life, we can co-create our life with the creator of it all. Have you ever thought about the peace and rest that you could have if you knew that you're co-creating this life with the creator of it all? Like, how amazing is that to think about? That the one that created everything is your co-creator as you live this life. And through him, there's no surprises. He knows what tomorrow's going to bring. And it might be something completely unexpected, but to know that you have somebody with you that already knows the end from the beginning. And how many times through your life, if you really reflect and you really look back and you think about, man, through some of the hardest times in your life, that you got to a point all of a sudden where you realize, man, that was actually a blessing. That door that was shut, that firing that happened, it was such a blessing. And so going back to my oldest son, when he was going through a lot of this, it's funny how many teenagers, 18, 19, 20-year olds that are going out there now. Now for me, I have people in all that age range, basically from 18 to 23, right? Those are my boys' age ranges. And, they think they need to have everything figured out. I remember when I was 18 and I graduated, I had no clue what I wanted to do for a living. I had no clue. Right. And I'm talking to some of these younger kids nowadays, and they think they should have everything figured out by 18, 19 years old. I don't know about you. I was an idiot at 18. Like, I didn't know nothing at 18 years old. I was just flying by the seat of my pants and trying to do whatever. But, thinking about how life can happen and again, going into these areas where you don't have to have it all figured out. Right? You can live this life and kind of be at this place of peace, knowing you're co-creating this life with somebody else. And so when my boy was talking about this, I told him a story. I actually spent my entire senior year through the delayed entry program of the Navy. That was my goal. I was going to graduate, honestly, with all the credentials to be an E4 with the Navy, which is kind of 4 steps up, so that once I graduated boot camp, I would immediately be an E4. I did all the requirements. I spent all my senior year preparing, going through all this. So then when it hits, right, I graduated high school. A month later, I was shipped off to boot camp in Orlando, Florida for the Navy. And there was about 3 or 4 days of basically no sleep. I couldn't even think right. And we're going through all this, and it was all this new stuff thrown at you. And I remember talking to one of my company commander, and I was like, man, I don't feel like I can even think straight. Is there someone I can just talk to for a second just to get my mind right? That's all I said. He said, sure, here's where you need to go. And so he sent me to this building. He said, go up on the I think it was the fifth or sixth floor. He said, go here and they'll help you out. And I did that. I did not realize that when I did that, I was literally admitting myself to the psychiatric ward. So I get off the elevator. I said, my company commander told me to come here because y'all had someone I could just talk to for a second. And they said, oh, and they basically admitted me to the psych ward. And I'm like, what the crap is going on? Right. Like, I was like, this is not my intention. This is not what I wanted. Like, I'm okay. But yet, because it was a Friday, I'll never forget it. It was a Friday. And I sat there and I had to spend the entire weekend there. And then you got all these psychiatrists coming at you, excuse me, with all these crazy questions, treating you like you're having some type of mental episode. And I'm like, I just needed a moment, right? Like, to get my head straight. Like, because again, if you've ever gone multiple days with very, very little sleep, it can mess with you. And again, as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't know what I was dealing with, right? Like, I was just kind of thrown into the situation and I was trying to get my head straight. So anyway, long story short, once that started, once I went down that road, they started my separation progress, my separation from the Navy. I did not realize that. And once I realized it, I was trying to fight it. And I went to a couple people and I said, I don't want to be kicked out of the Navy. Like, this was not my intention. I just had a moment. So how can I stay in? And they said, basically, since this process started, you kind of have 2 choices. One, you could go through the the separation program. Basically, it'll take about a month. They'll send you home. You can fight it from the outside, or you could stay in. You'll still have to stay in basically a separation unit, and you'll probably get sent home in 6 to 8 months. And I was like, so are you telling me I'm basically going to be sent home? And they said, yeah. And I was crushed. I had my whole next 4 years planned out. I thought everything was good. I've always had a passion with like law enforcement or anything to deal with law. I always thought that was fascinating, and that was my job. I was going to be a master at arms with the Navy, basically a military police. And all of a sudden, all that's gone. And I'm sitting back thinking, like, number one, I'm a failure. That was my first thought. How am I going to tell my parents all this? Because I'm going to be completely disappointing them. I'm disappointing myself. My wife and I, we started dating at 15, so we were still together. I'm going to be a big failure and disappointment to her. I feel like I let everyone down. It was one of the lowest moments of my life. I'll never forget making that phone call from the psych ward to my parents, letting them know what's going to happen, kind of freaking out. And again, not knowing what's going to happen the next in my future. And so I spent about a month in the separation unit. I ended up getting sent home. Now, let me tell you, in the military, when you sign up, they'll fly you out. They'll treat you like a king. Send you home. They send you home on a Greyhound. Now, if you've never taken a Greyhound bus from Orlando, Florida to Beaumont, Texas, it's about a 24-hour trip. That's an experience. Whoo! So there's some interesting people that gets on the bus. Let me just tell you that. But so I get home completely lost, not knowing what I'm going to do. I ended up moving into an apartment with a few friends of mine because I moved out when I was 18. And trying to trip through life basically. And then I ended up moving up to the Beaumont area with my wife because she was going to school up here and just trying to find work. But again, being completely lost, not at rest at all. A lot of turmoil in my life. But I was telling my son this story because in that moment, it was devastating. Looking back, if I wouldn't have got kicked out of the Navy for that, I may not have married my wife. Like, who knows if we would have stayed together the whole 4 years I was in the service. I don't know. If that wouldn't have happened, if I wouldn't have got married, I wouldn't have had the 3 sons that I have now. And I'm so grateful now that happened, even though in the moment it was devastating. I'm so grateful now that happened because of the marriage that I have. We almost have 30 years together. We have these 3 amazing sons, and that may not have happened if what I thought was the plan for my life, right, would have took place. I know God knows the end from the beginning. I know he tells us all the time, why worry about tomorrow, right? Just worry about today, right? Tomorrow will take care of itself. Worry about today. And finding that rest, putting Christ's yoke upon me and him taking the burdens, right? He says, come to me, all who are heavy laden, right? And have all these burdens. I will give you rest. I know what that rest is now working or walking 25 years with the Lord, right? I know what that rest is like, but going through it, and sometimes in those moments, I can't imagine not having a relationship with Christ now. Because over these last 25 years, having to go through so much, whether it was career changes, family changes, deaths in the families, natural disasters, whatever it might be, knowing I had a place of rest, which is in my Savior, right? And so many people don't have that. And I think that's where there's so many people that are so heartbroken, so angry, so discontent, right? With this world, with this country. I believe if you got born in America, you won the lottery, right? I've said this a million times because this is the best land. Even people that hate America aren't trying to leave it. Think about that. Now, everywhere else in the world, right, people are out there and they're fleeing their countries, right? Like if you're living in Venezuela right now, you're trying to get out. People in Cuba, people in North Korea, right? There are some countries you're trying to get out because it's so bad. I know people that they say they hate this country. They're not trying to leave it. Think about that. That's how powerful what we have here is. The freedom to be able to do as you want is amazing here. There are no limits. Don't ever allow anybody to lie to you that there's some limitation on your life because of your age, your sex, your color, your creed, your religion. There's nothing like that here. You have the ability to do whatever you want. Sadly, there's people that want to keep you down so they can keep their power. But we'll get into that in other episodes. But I'm saying finding rest, physical rest, mental rest, spiritual rest. is such an important part of your longevity of how you can live a younger life longer. I'm not a what if guy. Maybe you're one of those what if people, right? Where you sit around all day thinking, well, what about this? What about this? What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Right? And you're stressed out about stuff that you can't control. So I'm going to give you a little pro tip. Why do you allow, excuse me, why do you allow things you have no control over to have control over your life? I want to shift your mindset a little bit in the way you're thinking so you can have rest in your life. So think about this. Family member dies. When my mom passed away, she had an accident where she fell. She never came out of it. Okay, I have no control over that situation. None. No control. But how many people do you know that went through a tragic death in their family and 5, 10 plus years later, that's still their identity, right? It still has control over their life. It was a situation they had no control over, but yet they let it control their lives. And why do we do that? There's so many, when we get hit with hurricanes, I can't control the weather, right? I can't control if we get hit with a hurricane or not. But there's so many people that allow these situations they have zero control over to have complete control over their life. And sometimes it becomes almost their identity where they never have full rest, and it crushes them on every level. So I want to encourage you to start thinking about it a little bit differently. Again, it's not what you can do. It's not what you can't do. It's what can I do? I remember when we were going through the whole COVID situation, there was a lot of things I could not control, especially with our business. I couldn't control a lot of things. I couldn't control a lot of the mandates that were coming down. I couldn't control the shutdowns. I couldn't control all that. It was like, okay, what can I do? There was a lot of things I could do. And our business actually went almost vertical during COVID because my mindset was like, I'm not going to allow a situation I can't control to have control over my life. What can I control? And so I shifted mentally to a way where I could control things, right? What do I have control over? My actions, a lot of the things that I do my business, expanding my client list, helping other people monetize their client list, helping people make money from home, help people get their health better during that time, helping people just to have a distraction, right? Sometimes my business is my best friend because I can concentrate on helping other people and I can get my mind off the garbage that's going on in my life, right? Going through my mom's death was completely unexpected. She was living on her own, completely self-sufficient, healthy. She had a stomach bug. Then she ended up getting kind of weak and she ended up falling. She ended up hitting her head, never came out of it. Can't control that. That could have taken control over my life. I could have went into a dark spot for weeks. Why did this happen? Why did this, questioning everything? Who knows? I know she was ready to be reunited with my dad. I know that. I know she was ready to go home and go to heaven and be reunited with my dad. I do know that. I can take great peace and rest in that, knowing she's at a better spot, right? Because I couldn't control that situation. But so many times through life, we don't have rest, true rest in our life, because maybe you're what ifing everything. Maybe you're thinking 10 things down the road of what might happen. And 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, normally, none of it ever happens. So you're worrying and you're stressing about things that are taking your rest away from you, right? Because you're thinking about all the things that could possibly happen, which in reality, most of the time they never happen. So I want to encourage you, and if you need help with this, please email me, comment, like and subscribe to this page. Like if this is of value to you, share it. If you know people going through some of this, because there's so many times in life where we allow, again, situations out of our control to have control over our life that robs us of our peace and of our rest. And again, I love helping people work through this. This is what this community is going to be all about. Again, we're going to talk about faith things, money things, fitness things, right? We're going to talk about it all. Because as we want to live a younger life longer, if you're constantly stressed about the what ifs in life, it's going to affect your health. It's going to affect your emotional and mental state. You'll never fully have a peace, have rest. So again, this whole community that I'm intending on building is about how to help people live a younger life longer in every area of their life, to really hone in on the physical aspect, the mental aspect, the faith aspect, the finance aspect, like the whole thing, because it so affects us in so many ways. And we get to these points in life to where sometimes, again, we allow things to happen and have complete control over our lives that become our identity. And then it's almost like this stronghold in our life, or it's almost like we have this chain on us that until we're willing to break it, we'll never have true freedom. And I think freedom's a lot of things, right? Mentally, financially, time, all these kind of deals. So again, I want you to take a step back, and I'd love for you to share if you're going through some of this stuff, or if you're having some of these battles, or if there's some things you overcome, right? How you were able to, where you find your rest. I'd love to see where you find your rest. Some people find it on a golf course. Sometimes I find it fishing, right? Just getting out in nature and just enjoying this creation that we're able to enjoy. So again, I'd love for you guys to participate and communicate with me. I'd love for your feedback. Again, this will be better and better and better, I promise, as time goes on. But I want to get to this point because I'm going to have so many guests lined up that we're going to start interviewing some different people to give different perspectives on things. But this hit me very hard, especially this week, because we saw so many people in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We saw so many people on two different levels, that people that were supporters of him, people that were not. And there was so much unrest, so many people that don't have rest. They don't have peace in their life in so many areas, right? That event, it really affected people in different ways. Some people sought out the Lord. Some people celebrated. I don't know where you have to be on a mental port to celebrate the death of somebody. And there are a lot of people I don't agree with. I don't wish them dead, right? I wouldn't celebrate their death. So to me, somebody that's at that level where they're celebrating the death of somebody else, I know they're not at peace. I know they're not at rest. I know they don't have that inner peace, because if you did, you would never be at that level. And so anyway, I wanted to encourage you. Again, I'm a pretty upfront Christian. I have a lot of my views are from a biblical point of view, but also a rational point of view. But I know, because I had 24 years on this earth of unpeace, of no rest. I was constantly battling with myself, with my mind. My relationship with Christ took all that away. And it happened in a night, April 10th of 2000. I'll never forget it. It happened there. So getting to a point where now I have peace, to where I can be the head of my household. I can be the husband, the father, the friend that I need to be, because I can come at it from a different perspective, right? So sometimes we need to break out of the little echo chamber that we're in and just think. And sometimes it's taking that step back in a place of rest, of real reflection, because most people, say people that are celebrating this, and just because it's current events, I'm talking about this. How many people have ever reflected of, why do I really feel this way? Most people that didn't like him never really listened to him, never really heard him. They just heard what everyone else said about them. But if you're at a point where you're celebrating a man's death, you got to really think about, why do I feel that way? Like deep down, why am I happy someone else died? Get rid of all the rhetoric. It's still a man's life. He was still a husband, still a father. Why am I happy about that? Right? I don't know of a time in my life I've ever rejoiced somebody's death. But again, for the past 25 years, I've shifted a lot of things in my life to where I know where true peace is. I know where true rest is. And that's what I want for everybody. I want y'all to be able to experience the same kind of peace that I'm able to experience, especially when life comes at us really hard, because I don't care who you are, at some point, life's going to come at you. So with that, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Again, if this was of value, I'm always open to feedback. I'm always open to wanting to be better, right? And again, we're going to go into a lot of different interview styles coming up. We're going to go into a lot of different areas of your life because my intent is for you to get the most absolute life out of every single year you have on this earth, right? That's my intent of joining this community so we can trade a lot of tips, a lot of hacks, right? A lot of different things when it comes to your physical health, your mental health, your financial health, your faith help, right? Like all these kind of health, all these kind of things, so that we have this encompassing area to where we're living younger, longer in every area of our life. Because again, I don't want you to be physically fit but broke, right? I don't want you to be mentally strong but spiritually dead, right? We're all beings. We're all here for a purpose. We're all created for a purpose. Every one of us, over 8 billion people on this earth, no one has your fingerprints. You're unique. You're a very unique creation. And you have a purpose. You have a purpose for being here. I want to help bring all that out. I want to help you, again, get the absolute most life out of every single year you have on this earth. I'm 49 years old. I don't even think of myself as middle aged. Mentally, I'm still in my 20s. Like, I'm just living life as full as I can to get the most out of this life, to live a life with no regrets. So, with that, guys, I appreciate you tuning into this latest episode. Episode 3 is in the books. And I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about this community. We are going to build a movement together. So, take care, guys. God bless. We'll see you next week. Take care.